His phone was still connected. His voice was still talking. And then, mid-sentence, it stopped. Not a dropped call, not a goodbye, just silence. A silence that has never been explained. A silence that has lasted over 15 years. What took Brandon Swanson on that dark Minnesota road? Why did he suddenly stop speaking? Why has his body never been found? And why does the last thing he ever said make investigators go completely cold every single time they hear it? You are about to find out everything. Stay with me, because this story will change the way you look at a simple phone call forever. It was May 14th, 2008. Brandon Swanson was 19 years old, a young man from Marshall, Minnesota, with his whole life ahead of him. He had been out with friends that night, celebrating the end of his college semester. He was happy, he was laughing, he was alive. At around midnight, Brandon drove his car off a rural road and got stuck in a ditch near the small town of Canby. He was not hurt, he was completely fine. He called his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, and asked them to come help him. His father immediately got in the car and drove out to find him. This part sounds completely normal. A young man gets stuck, he calls his parents, his dad comes to help. Nothing about this seems frightening yet, but here is where everything begins to shift. When his father arrived at the location Brandon described, Brandon was not there. The car was there, the ditch was there, but Brandon was gone, and he was still on the phone. Brian Swanson drove slowly through the dark country roads, headlights cutting through the flat Minnesota night, calling out his son's name through the open window. Brandon, still on the phone, could hear his father's voice from a distance. He could hear him calling, but he could not see the headlights. He told his father that. He said he could not see him at all. This was the first strange detail. They were in the same area. They were both looking, but somehow they could not find each other. For nearly an hour, Brian drove and Brandon walked. They stayed connected on the phone the entire time. Brandon kept describing what he saw around him: flat fields, dirt roads, a few trees, nothing that helped his father pinpoint exactly where he was. The darkness was total out there. No streetlights, no landmarks, just cold, open farmland stretching in every direction. Brandon never sounded panicked. That is what makes this even more unsettling. He sounded frustrated, maybe a little tired, but not afraid. He was walking, trying to reach somewhere recognizable, somewhere with lights. He told his father he was going to walk toward the town of Lind, and so Brian drove toward Lind, still on the phone, still talking to his son. Then something changed. Brandon's voice shifted just slightly, not dramatically, just enough. He said a single word that no one has ever been able to fully explain. He said, "Oh," just that one word, quiet, almost casual, and then the call went completely silent. Brian kept calling his name. He kept saying, "Brandon, Brandon, are you there?" Nothing. The line stayed open, but there was no response. No sound of struggle, no cry, no footsteps, just open air and silence. Brandon Swanson was never seen or heard from again. Search teams arrived within hours. Hundreds of volunteers, law enforcement officers, and search and rescue workers spread across the fields around Canby and Lind. They searched for days, then weeks. Helicopters flew low over the farmland. Search dogs worked every inch of the terrain. Infrared technology was used to scan the ground. Nothing. Not a footprint leading away, not a piece of clothing caught on a fence, not a single physical trace that Brandon Swanson had ever walked through that area. Investigators began to study the phone call itself very carefully. They analyzed the call logs. They traced the cell tower data. What they found added another layer of confusion that no one could explain cleanly. The cell tower data suggested Brandon may not have been anywhere near where his car was found,
when he made the calls. He may have been somewhere else entirely. This meant one terrifying possibility. Brandon may have been moving in a completely different direction than anyone assumed. His parents never gave up. Annette and Brandon Swanson became advocates for missing persons, fighting for a law that would require authorities to treat missing adults with the same urgency as missing children. That law was passed in Minnesota. It is called Brandon's Law. They turned their unbearable grief into something that has helped other families. But even while doing all of that, they still do not know what happened to their son. Investigators have never closed the case. They have never named a suspect. They have never found evidence of foul play. They have never found a body. The leading theory for years was that Brandon accidentally fell into the Yellow Medicine River, which runs through that area. But here is what the investigators never expected to find when they looked closer at that river.
The Yellow Medicine River was searched extensively. Divers went in, teams walked the banks, the water level was studied, and yet nothing belonging to Brandon was ever recovered from the river. No clothing, no personal items, nothing. For a case where accidental drowning is the primary theory, there is a shocking absence of physical evidence to support it. Rivers carry things, water moves objects downstream, something almost always surfaces. But in Brandon's case, the river gave nothing back. This absence is not just strange, it is deeply disturbing to every investigator who has studied this case seriously. Some began to question whether the river theory was even correct. If he did not fall into the river, then where did he go? That open farmland was searched so thoroughly that many people believe if he had simply collapsed somewhere in those fields, they would have found him. The fields are flat. There is nowhere to hide. This is the part of the story where the psychological weight of it becomes almost unbearable. Imagine being Brandon Swanson that night. You are on the phone with your son. He is alive. He is talking. He is right there, somewhere in that darkness, just beyond your headlights. And then one word. One quiet, calm, almost casual word, and then nothing. No explanation, no sound, just the hum of an open line going nowhere. That word, that single O, has haunted investigators and armchair detectives for 15 years. Was it surprise? Was it recognition? Did he see something? Did something happen to him so suddenly that he did not even have time to react with fear? If you are watching this and you have a theory, I genuinely want to hear it. Leave your thoughts below, like this video, and subscribe to Lost Beyond Sight, because the people in these stories deserve to be remembered. Over the years, several alternative theories have emerged, and some of them are far more disturbing than a simple accident. One theory involves the possibility that Brandon was not alone out there, that someone else was in that darkness with him, that his sudden silence was not an accident, but something far more deliberate. Investigators have never completely ruled this out. The rural roads around Canby are quiet at night. There would be no witnesses, no cameras, no one to see anything. If someone had been waiting out there or had come across Brandon while he was walking alone, no one would have known. The word O could have been the sound of recognition, the sound of seeing a face or a car approaching, something that did not alarm him immediately but changed everything within seconds. Another theory that has gained serious attention involves the geography of the area itself. Some researchers believe Brandon became deeply disoriented in the dark and walked much farther than anyone initially estimated. Rural Minnesota at midnight is absolute darkness, without landmarks, without phone GPS that worked accurately in 2008. A person can lose all sense of direction within minutes. Brandon may have walked miles in the wrong direction, away from every search zone, into an area that was simply never covered. This theory would explain why the search turned up nothing. They may have been looking in entirely the wrong place. And here is the detail that makes this theory genuinely terrifying. The search radius used in the first critical days was based on assumptions about how far a young man could walk, but those assumptions may have been completely wrong. Brandon was young, physically fit, and had been walking for nearly an hour before the call ended.
The real search zone may have needed to be twice the size it was. 15 years have passed since Brandon Swanson disappeared into that Minnesota night. His case remains officially open. His family still waits. His mother still speaks about him with a love that is painful to witness, the kind of love that does not break, even when it has every reason to. No charges have ever been filed. No suspect has ever been named. No remains have ever been recovered. Brandon Swanson exists in a permanent state of the unknown, somewhere between here and gone, between explanation and silence. The investigation found no evidence of foul play. It found no evidence of accident. It found nothing. And in missing persons cases, nothing is often the most terrifying finding of all. What we are left with is a phone call, a call that lasted nearly 50 minutes, a call where a young man talked to his father, described his surroundings, and stayed calm right up until the very last second. And then one word, "Oh," and then silence. That one word carries the entire weight of this mystery. It is not a scream, it is not a name, it is not a sound of pain. It is the sound of something unexpected, something seen, something realized, something that Brandon Swanson understood in that final moment that none of us, not his family, not the investigators, not anyone who has studied this case for 15 years, has ever been able to understand. His phone stayed connected, the lines stayed open, his father kept calling his name into the dark, and somewhere out there in those flat, cold Minnesota fields, the answer still exists, hidden, waiting, silent. So here's the question that I want you to sit with tonight. If Brandon saw something in that darkness, something that made him say, "Oh," so quietly and so calmly right before he vanished forever, what do you think it was?